So the first one that's been built into the settings now is the detailed transaction registers. As we all know, when we update a register, whether it be an invoice, data entry register, an AP or AR or SO, we update the sales journal, and then we update the detailed transaction register. So that has been an option now inside of security to do that automatically.
And one thing on that, it's always been a kind of a question. Why do we have to update the sales journal? And then in a second step, get asked the question, do we want to update the daily transaction register, which is simply the posting to the general ledger module, right? So it's like, and you can't change it. You have to just update it. And so it's like, why is that a two-step process? Well, there were some good reasons, and there have been some good reasons to do it in 2 steps. We've got some customers where the controller, especially when we're initially implementing a system, they want to update it because they want to see all the GL postings and make sure the system's been set up correctly, those kinds of things. So there have been some reasons to separate the tasks, but we're happy that they now have incorporated that process so that you can set it up. And it is, like Jeremy said, it is a security option inside of role maintenance. You have to turn that on by role to determine who has that ability. And it's not really even then something they're having to execute. If their role has been set up to allow for automatic update of the daily transaction register, then after they update their detailed posting register, their sales journal, as an example, or their invoice register, it automatically just prints and updates the daily transaction register all as part of the same process. So that's a real nice step saver for sure, one that we've been after for a long time.
So next one is paperless office, and I think it's fair to say the first one, DTR, if you're using paperless office, that DTR is saved out to the server in that automatic update, and we're capturing that. And then paperless office as a whole has also added the ability to email salespeople. So we talked briefly about this yesterday. What's the impact there? What's the real use?
I mean, we've had customers that, they would like every time an order is entered, they have a salespeople or maybe their entire sales team wants a copy of that customer's order. So if you have an internal sales staff that's entering orders, customers are calling and placing orders, the outside salesperson would like to see those orders. Is probably just the easiest example of that. Well, in previous versions, we had to go in and somehow set up the salesperson's email on the customer record, right? Which is a lot of maintenance if the salesperson changes. They've now given us the ability to, an paperless office, enable a salesperson. So when you set up a salesperson record, you can say, hey, this is a salesperson that would like to receive orders and or invoices for their customers. So now if the salesperson's been assigned to the customer order, when you execute that, when you send the paperless office order to the customer, a copy of that order will also go to the salesperson automatically. So the management of that process is a lot simpler because it's done at the salesperson level rather than trying to manage it at the customer level.
Yeah, as we know, all salespeople are tracking their internal sales in a spreadsheet so they can back it up against their payroll. So it kind of cuts down those questions and copies being sent. So I think the other thing, I don't have any personal experience with this, but I believe that works with split sales reps as well, not just the primary.
Good point. There is a way to indicate whether, if you've got a split or you've got like a manager override, which Sage can handle as well. If you've got additional salespeople that are effectively linked to that commission record, that it would get sent to those additional salespeople as well.
So purchases and clearing is near and dear to everybody's heart that's doing inventory. So the date sensitive report helps in that audit. Can you explain why that's helping? What's the real impact there?
Yeah, we should have an entire session on purchases clearing. It's probably one of the most it's one of the things we help customers with all the time, purchases clearing. And Really what is purchases clearing? How does it get reconciled? And what with previous versions, we had no, easiest way to say it is previous versions had no purchases clearing cutoff. So the purchases clearing report that you would print, which is used to reconcile, what actually is still open in the purchase order module in terms of, items been received but not invoiced, or invoiced and not received, or maybe you have different quantities, right? We received 100 of these, but we've only been invoiced for 50 of them. Well, that stays in the purchases clearing account, or the many of you call it the unvouchered accounts payable account, until that purchase order is reconciled. Well, we had no way to print that report for reconciliation purposes with a cutoff date. So like, in accounts receivable, accounts payable, you can print those with cutoffs, and they should then tie to your general ledger account. With purchases clearing, it just was always ran as of today, or whenever you ran it, that was the date you got the report. So it made the reconciliation of the account at month end very difficult. So what they've done now is they've given us the ability to run the purchases clearing report with a cutoff date, so that now you can effectively, or more easily, there were ways to do it, but more easily reconcile that general ledger account at month end.
It's a barrier, there's no doubt about that. So this kind of relates back to the security event that you have up in automatic DTR update, but the user inquiry within security now allows you to do a reverse lookup of security by role. Can you explain how that works, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, in the old versions, you set up users and you set up roles, and then users get assigned to roles. But then it was very difficult. They had reports, but you had to print these lengthy reports out to determine like who actually has access to user maintenance, like who can go in and create users, or who actually has access to general ledger account maintenance. It was just difficult because you did set them up, but there was no way to inquire in by task, by user, by role, like who has access to all these different tasks inside of Sage. So I'm going to kind of show you how that works. They've really simplified it. So if there's ever a question of like who in our organization can get to what tasks in the Sage interface, which is an important question to ask, right? The security gets set up on the front end. Is it ever kind of managed or maintained as we onboard new users and other users leave the organization? Like, are we keeping up on the security inside of Sage? And so it's good to review that. This gives us a much, I think, simpler way to make that determination. So I can actually show you how that sets up. I'm going to jump back into our system real quick. I'm just going to go down. How are we doing on time? We okay? Yeah. Want to just show you on the, I won't show you all of these, but on the purchases clearing, they've just added that in the purchase order module. So we've always had the purchases clearing report and the purchases clearing in open PO format. This is your purchases clearing with a cutoff date. So now we have the ability to run, and they're basically using the PO history. This is one other thing I should mention is I forget what version it got added, but we now have purchase order history. I think that got added back in 18 or 19 or something like that. It's been a number of versions ago, but you have to be maintaining purchase order history for this option to work. So we would need to turn that function on in purchase order setup options so that you've got PO history. If that's turned on, then you can now run this purchases clearing from history report. And pretty simple, here's where we would enter our cutoff date. So we would exclude transactions after, month end. It's now, November 3rd. We're trying to reconcile our October purchases clearing. We would just run that with a 10/31 cutoff date, and it would exclude all the transactions after that cutoff date. The security then, the security is all set up in Library Master. One thing they did do too is, this is 2023, I think, or is it 2022? Doesn't matter. Within the last two versions, don't recall which version they did it, but security is now on its own menu. In previous versions, it was all on the main menu. It's now got its own menu, but the inquiry function that we were talking about is here under role user inquiry. So now you have the ability to kind of look by role or by user or by task or by security option, which is actually another option within security, but we'll just look at these three. Who has access to what? So as an example, if I wanted to look at who in our system has access to library master, user maintenance, where users get set up, who actually has that, I can just say, okay, I want to view it by task. I pick my module and I pick the task. And it's going to show me the admin role has access. And then I can drill down on it and it'll say, okay, well, MTX, this is my user account. I'm logged in as MTX. This is the user then that has access to it for all companies. So in this system, I'm the only user that has access to this, different from something like accounts payable. If I go into accounts payable and I want to see who has the ability to maintain vendors, create new vendors, maintain existing vendors, I select my task. I go to vendor maintenance. Well, now I can see administrative role has access to it. Well, who's part of administrative? Oh, well, that's the MTX user. That's me. Somebody, the AP role has access to it. Well, who's part of the AP role? Oh, Dave. Dave, he's our accounts payable person. He has access to that role as well. And so really the ability to pick a task, determine then quickly what roles have access to it, and then take it one step further, what users are actually part of that role. You can also look at it by role. So I could say, well, I want to look at this by role. Here are the roles that I have set up. I've got an admin role, an accounts payable role, a shipping role. Well, who actually has access to shipping? Oh, well, it's Tom. Tom's our shipping person. That makes sense. Well, what actually does he have access to? He has access to, across all companies, the sales order module, the shipping menu, and these are all the tasks within that menu that he has access to. So a pretty quick way to, by task, by user, by role, drill into like who can do what in our system.
Yeah, it's definitely nice because it can get muddy really fast.
It gets muddy, yeah, because we have some customers that have very granular. I mean, you see kind of all modes of setup, but we have some customers that have very granular security setup, right? They have a shipping role, an accounts payable role, an invoice data entry role, a lot of roles. And so over time, like you said, Jeremy, it gets fairly muddy.
Yeah, it gets spaghetti.